story begins in a table just like this in Jerusalem about 2,000 years ago, where Jesus gathered together with his friends, the disciples, to have the Last Supper. As he was sitting on the table, he told the disciples really bad news. He said, I must die, and 3 days later, I'm going to rise. They didn't really understand him at first. And he said, but first, one of you guys is going to betray me. All the disciples were shocked, and they were like, not I, Jesus, I'll never do that. And some were saying, was it me? Is it me? And Jesus said, the one who dips his bread on the soup is the one. And as Jesus began to dip, he said, yes. Judas said, is it me, Jesus? Yes. It is you, Judas. Go. Do your thing. And so Judas took off. Go ahead, take off, Judas. Judas left. When he left, he went to talk to the priest, and he sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. That's it. That's all that he sold Jesus for. And we are going to go. As soon as they heard of who Jesus was, they started to plan a way to kill Jesus. After Jesus finished his bread and his wine and finished all his food, he said, let's go to the Garden of Gethsemane so we can pray. Let's go follow him. Come on. Jesus is now in the Garden of Gethsemane. He tells his disciples, come, disciples. Come, disciples. And the disciples come. Come to the garden. I want to leave you here. I want you to pray with me. As I go a little further, I shall go pray further, and you guys stay here and pray with me. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I'm gonna go rest, bro.
Yeah.
Hey, wake up! Jesus comes and says, I told you guys to pray with me. You guys are taking a nap?
Sorry.
Do it again. I'm going to go again, and I'm going to pray.
Okay.
I'll be back. You stay here and pray.
Okay.
I'm a little tired, bro.
What?
Feeling a little tired.
Me too.
What? You guys are asleep again, Jesus said. I've only been gone an hour, and you guys are already asleep. It's okay. Never mind. They're here. The person that gives me a kiss is the traitor. Oh, here comes Judas right now. So at that moment, Judas comes and gives Jesus a kiss in the cheek. And all of the guards of the priests came and took Jesus. And all of his disciples ran away. They all ran away from Jesus. Why? Because they were scared. They said they were going to follow him always. But it was a scary situation. So they all took off. And they took Jesus to Pilate. Let's go see what they've done to Jesus. Jesus has been taken to Pilate. And Pilate is saying, what do you guys want me to do with this Jesus? And they're saying,
Crucify him! Crucify him!
but why? He has, let me ask him some questions. So Pilate takes Jesus and starts asking him some questions. Is it true that you are the king of the Jews? And Jesus said, you've said it. And so after extensive questioning, Pilate says, I don't think this guy is any bad. I mean, he's a little crazy, but I don't think there's anything wrong with him. So what about if I just give him a little spanking?
Crucify him!
You guys don't want me to give him a spanking with the spoon?
No, crucify him!
Okay. What about if I spank him with a chancla? Would that be happy?
Crucify him!
This won't make you happy. This really hurts. I mean, you could ask any kid.
Crucify him!
Fine, not the chancla. So, you guys still want me to crucify? You guys are crazy. So, Pilate decides, okay, fine, I'm going to crucify him. I'm going to wash my hands out of this sin. And he belongs to you guys. Now go and do whatever you're going to do with him. And so, all the priests took Jesus. And they took him. And the guards beat him up so bad. They punched him. They pulled his beard. They hurt him so much. They got a crown. They created this crown out of pure thorns. And they shoved it on his head. And when they did that, it stabbed him in the head. And blood ran through his face. And they punched him so hard. And they beat him up with whips so bad that when someone would see his face, they couldn't recognize him. He was so beat up But every time people will beat him up, Jesus could have said, he could have sent the angels and said, enough. And everything would have stopped. But he decided to keep going. He decided to let them beat him because of you and for me. He did it for you and he did it for me. And so Jesus allowed them to beat him up because he had already said it had to be done. So they beat him up and they took Jesus to the cross and they nailed him. They put big, big nails and they nailed him in a cross on one hand, and then they took his other hand and nailed him there on his finger, on his hand as well. And they put nails on his feet and they picked up the cross and he hung there for hours. He hung there until it was time for him to give up his spirit. And finally he said, God, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. The people would come and say, hey, you saved others. You rose others from the dead. Do it for yourself now. You did miracles for all these kinds of people. Why don't you just do it for yourself? And Jesus didn't answer. He just took it. Finally, after many hours, he died. And as soon as he died, there was a great earthquake. And it was dark all over. And all of a sudden, Jesus was dead. Joseph, his friend, took Jesus, went to Pilate and said, Pilate, can I please have the body of Jesus so I can bury him before the Sabbath day? And so they took Jesus' body off the cross, and Joseph took him to his own tomb, brand new tomb, and he buried him there. The next day, it was the Sabbath, and no one does anything in the Sabbath because it is holy. And then the next day, it was Sunday morning, Mary and about 4 other ladies went to the tomb to check on Jesus. They wanted to go mourn him. They missed him. They were crying for him. And so when they got to the tomb, oh my gosh, lo and behold, something's wrong. The tomb, the soldiers, what happened to the soldiers that were standing guarding the tomb? They weren't there anymore. And the stone had been rolled away. And all of a sudden they see this angel. And the angel said, why are you seeking the living among the dead? He is not here. And Mary and all the other ladies were scared. They were like, oh my gosh, what's going on? The angel said, don't be afraid. Go and tell your other friends that Jesus is done what he said he would do. He has risen. He's no longer here. The tomb is empty. And so Mary ran, and all the ladies ran to tell everybody, oh my God, Jesus is alive. So when they got to Galilee, they told all the guys that were there, hey, Jesus is alive. He's not in the tomb. The tomb is empty. And so all the disciples were shocked, and they didn't believe it at first. So Peter and John ran to the tomb to see if it was true. And as they got there, they looked inside. The tomb, the stone was rolled away. The guards were no longer there. And they went inside, and the tomb was empty. And all they found was the linen where they had covered Jesus. And the cloth that was in his face was nicely folded on the tomb. And so Peter and John ran back and told the disciples, indeed it's true, the tomb is empty. There's no one there. And all of a sudden, as they were talking amongst each other, Jesus shows up. He shows up in the room where they were at, and they were shocked. They were so shocked. They were like, Jesus! And they were so happy to see him. And then Jesus was like, I told you guys I was going to do this. You guys didn't believe me, right? We are now here 2,000 years later. We have not seen it with our very own eyes, but we have believed it and we've seen it with our hearts. Jesus is saying, blessed are us. We are blessed to believe that Jesus is risen. We're celebrating now that the tomb is empty. It's not about Easter eggs or Easter bunnies, but it's about a God who came and died for you, and he died for me. And the best part is that the same resurrection power that rose Jesus from the dead is that same power that lives inside of you and me. So now the enemy, the devil, is useless. He has no power over you or me. Only God can decide when we live and when we die. Praise him for that. Worship him every day. If you haven't given your life to Jesus today, I ask you to pray and ask God to love you and tell God how much you love him and how much you thank him today for what he has done for you and what he has done for me. Love you guys. Have an awesome Easter. Okay guys, just like Jesus was able to overtake any power of the enemy, you are able to overcome just like he did. Okay, and I'm going to show you guys through this stick and through this piñata right here that this time it's nothing to Jesus. We can destroy the power of the enemy through Jesus Christ, and that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to